Welcome everybody to today's iteration of the OpenWhisk Interchange call. I have hopefully compiled a shortened agenda for today. Glancing at the attendee list, I think everybody's a known suspect. So I think we're good for today on that topic. I have some dev list topics I've culled from the list. I've also recorded some PRs for review. You can add things to the list ad hoc as we go along. Then I have some scheduled topics to talk about, and then we can choose the next moderator. And I'll note that, as you see here, that the next meeting, we may make a decision today on whether to move the meeting an hour earlier or to maintain it the same for another iteration. So we'll see. If anybody else, and I don't know if anybody's on to talk to these specific topics, but I just wanted to raise them here. Embedded Kafka support, OpenWhisk standalone. I think this Chetan opened this one up on the dev list to talk about a PR he raised. 4628. So just want to raise attention to that. If people want to review the PR, please do so. I saw that Dave called a vote for the client components. Dave, did you want to say anything about that besides verify and vote?
That's it. Just get vote so we can do the release, get it out by Friday, then move on to the next one.
All right. Acceptable file types and test portion of source releases. So this is a discussion that we had excluded tests from, I believe, our scanning and other tools, and that there was discussion even before graduation that we wanted to build from source, do things like that. I saw some other PRs in relation to that. What's the status of this topic, Dave? And I saw some PRs like in some of the repos about building from source. Anything to do here?
Right. Well, so for the CLI, I just cut out the integration tests from Whisk deploy, so we're not releasing those.
Okay.
And I open an issue that hopefully someone will go off and fix that to build those test artifacts from source. For the core repo, we have a similar thing, so we open an issue for that. There's a bunch of zip files and other things in test.dat that really should be built from source.
Well, I may serendipitously present something that might be moving in that direction. So cool, thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Good to have that off that to-do list that we had from before graduation. Back pressure for slow activation, that's been a topic that a lot of people have commented on. Has there been any, I don't know, Tyson, I guess you might give us the pulse on this. What's the reading on this? Is there any active actions being recommended or?
Sorry, I didn't follow which item you're asking about.
Back pressure. Slow activations.
Yeah, it's moving slowly. I've been working on breaking it into smaller PRs. And some of those PRs have also stalled out a little bit. So it's coming.
All right, just raising tension.
Yep.
Then your execution design, you posted some design stuff. Did you want to take us through the designs you posted during the regular topics, or did you just want to leave it as a dev list topic for now?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but
so yeah, do you want to present or show your design at any part today on today's call, or do you want to leave that for the dev list for now?
Yeah, there's two things. One is sharing briefly the design document that I shared on the dev list, and then Dan McWeeny was going to do a brief demo of some prototype code that we have.
Okay, cool. Then we'll put you as first on the scheduled topics. I wasn't quite sure. Optionally skip Kafka zookeeper polls, and Roderick was on top of that. He called out a PR there. Just raising attention on that one too. I don't see Roderick on, so we'll skip over that topic for now. And continuing, then Sven, I see, is on. I think I saw him join. Maybe not. Yes, Sven. So I know there's a lot of discussion here, and I saw that Sven opened 2 PRs. One is merged, one's approved. I know a lot of Dave and others have commented on this. I think there's maybe no one's merged it. I think that somebody asked if Nicolay or somebody else could look at it from runtime's perspective. Is that the only outstanding thing left on that one?
Hey, here's Sven speaking.
Hey,
Just
Sven.
to make sure, the first PR was provided by someone else, and the troubles which were caused by that first PR led me to open that second one to improve the here. Basically, I would be fine with merging that. It's only that, well, I was not sure whether we should already update the Swagger API design or not. Sorry, I have a lot of echoes here.
I think I muted a couple people, so if you've been muted, please know that you have to unmute to speak up. So anybody want to respond? Sven, I was searching for the source of the extra noise, so I didn't catch everything you said, Sven. So I apologize. So what was the ask again of people, Sven?
Yeah. So Dave already let me know that he would prefer to have that Swagger API documentation updated. I would be happy to hear more voices about that, but maybe even if there is demand to change the Swagger API, probably I would like to have that one merged and move the Swagger API work to a second PR.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Sven. I was going to actually, I think you can merge that. I thought you were waiting for Roderick or someone to give feedback, but I think as far as I'm concerned, we can merge the documentation change anytime you're ready.
Yeah, probably, yes. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything, but if we are about to change that Swagger part anyway, I maybe just remove the to-do and we get that one merged.
Cool. Thanks. All right. Any other PRs we need to, or Devils topics we need to cover? I know that I stopped about page 3 of my browser, so there might have been some other ones I didn't capture here. Anything else we should talk about or catch people on? Not, let's go to scheduled topics. Other PR, I don't know, other PR reviews, not scheduled topics, PR review. So I noticed that, from last meeting, we called out several PRs. I think that of all of them, only one is still open, 4604. A lot of decision about action result inclusion logs on a protocol basis. That's from Rudiger. So that's still open. I don't know if there's that. And I saw that Roderick opened a topic also on 4 PRs that were ready to merge that had that tag. I think that's great. Maybe that using that tag more compulsory for our meetings would be helpful because I was able to quickly draw up the list and there's only one left. Add unkind unknown to fallback to the activation 4617. So I'll just call out people's attention here to see if people can take a look at that one if they have a chance. 4617 from Roderick's list. Any other PRs people want to talk about? All right. I'm just going to go to scheduled topics then. So I wasn't sure. So if Dan and you want to take us through the design, I can take over sharing if you want, and I'll stop.
Yep.
All right.
Let's see. Sharing. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
So when we last spoke, I gave a brief presentation over this design, and I was just going to do a brief recap. So the proposal was to have a OpenWhisk router layer to delegate to specific execution providers that could be based on varied implementations like Knative or V8 isolates or OpenWhisk. And some examples was basically using Knative to route anything that could be managed as a pre-warm container, and sending anything that behaves as a black box container to OpenWhisk. Another example that might be worth mentioning is like sequences and compositions, where if an action arrives that sequences and compositions, it may be useful to still just route those to OpenWhisk, and only use this for primitive actions. So what I sent to the dev list this week was this design document. If folks are interested in reading more details, please go here and comment. I think there's a lot more details than what I went into in the initial presentation. I won't read the entire thing right now, but I've included this same diagram of concepts and some more details about the router and execution providers, some open questions around what is the exact scope of what an execution provider would actually do, whether it handles the entire connection or whether it is simply a specific API for executing an activation message. So that's kind of the biggest question in my mind, is what is the specific execution provider API? There's a little discussion around state management for things where some resource allocation needs to go on at the router, as opposed to resource allocation that happens inside the execution provider. I think this is a little bit different than what we have in the controller today, but I think can be important for being able to efficiently use resources that are shared in a cluster. And then more details about different example execution providers at the bottom here. So if folks want to comment on this, that would be great. I'll put this link into the chat here in case anybody wants to go there right now. For now, Dan McWeeny and I have been doing a little bit of prototyping, mostly Dan, thank you, on this design. So he's going to give a brief demo of some example implementation. So Dan, if you're okay, I'll just turn it over to you.
Yep, that's cool. So just so everybody knows, the code that I'm going to be showing today is we're going to open up a PR for it. And we can talk a little bit maybe after I do the demo about where I'm shoving it, because there might be some concerns about where I'm kind of depositing it. So, but let's first show you what it's actually doing here. So I've already actually fired up the component that's known as the router, and this is just so happens to be a Kubernetes cluster deployed on Azure. So it goes ahead and creates its own namespace, and you can see here it's got a couple deployments, and more interestingly, it has a couple pods, one being the router itself. So one thing that's not kind of really done yet is splitting up the router's namespace from the actions namespace. So you see these two pods sitting here, these are actually pods that are managed by Knative, and these are what the router views as stem cells. So we can add a stimulus to the system here, and I'm just, again, just using the command line on the left-hand side here. That will fire a new request to run an activation. And hopefully what we'll see here is, might take a second, is we see another one of these pods running. And the reason we see another pod running isn't because I actually, it is a secondary effect of me actually running an action. So if we blow up the logs here from the router, what actually happens is, let me see if I can go find the request. Sorry, it's obviously debug logging turned on. So it goes and checks to see if I've got a stem cell already running for this guy. And if I do, it'll just go ahead and use that existing stem cell. But if I don't, then it'll say, all right, I need to allocate a stem cell, so mark it to a certain degree as this action. So that would be the init process happening on the container. None of that's happening today, but you can imagine there's some of those secondary steps. So it goes ahead and writes that this router has taken that stem cell as being used for this particular namespace action combination, and it goes ahead and writes that into etcd. Then what you see happening also async from all of this stuff is there's another process on the router that's checking around to see, okay, how many free stem cells are there? So how many Knative services are registered on the system, and how many have been put into etcd. So you can think of the current state of the cluster as being entirely managed by the execution provider, in this case Knative, whereas the state of the stem cells themselves and being used as actions, Knative doesn't really know anything about. The router is in possession of that, and it manages that distributed state through an etcd service. It uses its own etcd, it's not reusing the one that's part of Kubernetes. So when it realizes we've configured this particular router to always have 2 stem cells available, so it realizes, oh gosh, I now see that there's 1 stem cell that's been allocated in etcd, and I see that there are only 2 total ones in the cluster, so let me instruct Knative to make another stem cell. And that's what you see here. It says installing service with JSON, and again, this is all debug logging. You can see while this is happening, the request that actually went all the way through to the original stem cell is actually responding here. So you can see there's reasons why the messages are a little bit interleaved. And then you can see the routers waiting for Knative to report that the service that it has that it asked to be created is actually created successfully. And somewhere down here, blah, 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 here we go. And here's Knative reporting that all of the Knative conditions have been satisfied, meaning the service is ready. And then the router just sits around and waits for more requests. So all these are happening in parallel with each other. The management of the stem cells is a separate process, if you will, from the actual handling of the requests. So this really gets us the ability to, the front door of the router says, okay, I see that I already have a stem cell allocated for that, and here's the URL. So it's keeping that information, and it can go ahead and route that request straight to the URL that's provided by Knative. If there isn't an allocated stem cell, it'll go ahead and take a stem cell and init it, if you will, into that particular action for that particular action, and then route the request to that action. And then a background process of the router is to basically go ahead and always make sure that there's the right number of stem cells. And because we're using Knative as the execution provider in this case, the horizontal scalability of the action container itself is really managed by Knative. We haven't worked out obviously all the details of some of these things yet, like how do you init pods that are being horizontally scaled by the Knative horizontal scaler, but this is all stuff that we think we can work through. So I will shortly open up a PR for this code. This is all written in Golang. So it's basically all greenfield code. and we were going to propose, and this is where I don't really care where we put it, but we were going to propose making an incubator directory inside the parent OpenWhisk project. So it would look, oops, I didn't mean to stop sharing. So it would go, oh, whoops, here. So it would go somewhere like here in the main Apache OpenWhisk repo. That required me to loosen some of the build utilities to basically kind of like disregard the incubator directory for, there's like header checks and stuff like that, which I just didn't want to worry about for what is just a bunch of incubator files. So I have a PR into that utilities repo to just weaken that check a little bit, and then I can start dumping this in here. But we're not really partial to where we put this. I just needed to pick something, so I chose the word incubator. So that's it, and then Tyson and I obviously can take questions.
Yeah, I think that regardless of what directory you put it under, I think that it still need the Apache headers added to all the files so that it appears in a repo. I think that'll be required.
Okay, I wasn't sure because some of the files are Go. I didn't want to mess around with that. But if that's a criteria, then I'll start messing around with it.
Yeah, hopefully it's a mindless activity where you just paste the header in all the files.
Okay.
Cool, thanks. Dave, any comments from your end?
No, I mean, this sounds pretty cool. It's great to see some experimentation around Knative and sort of moving the project forward. That's awesome.
So out of curiosity, I wasn't clear. So the router and stuff you said is written in Go. Are we going in a direction where we're going to be adopting router in some of our control plane as you using SED? But is there a direction where we might actually code these things as CRDs and have resolvers and things like that?
So we could, yeah. So you could imagine a new top level primitive in Kubernetes that's like open OW function or something to that degree. We were just trying to delegate a lot of that complexity out of this. The only other reason for not doing that is that the loop of deployment for the CRDs is a little bit slower than if you were to just, and we're going through Knative too, so it would be like first going through ours, then going through theirs. So I didn't want to mess around with it too much. And one of the things that the API server documentation in Kubernetes kind of says is that if you're doing things that are more like RPCs, you should probably just use the API. But if you're doing something like, I wish to assert the state of the system to be equal to this, CRDs are maybe better because you kind of get like that nice feedback loop where you say like, I want to apply, I want the system to look like this state. But in the case, at least what we've found with Mesos, the case of this is much more like create a container, remove a container, you know, like it's a little bit faster, a little bit more like an RPC than it is like asserting the state of the system. But that was just a design choice we made. I don't think we're necessarily wedded to that at all.
Yeah, I was just curious because it seemed to be like you're trying to also maintain the state of the active set of stem cell pool, the pods and things. So that seemed to be of the kind you described in terms of making sure the system was in the state you want it to be against a configured state or desired state.
Yeah.
I keep your options open here because I think at large scale, etcd is a bottleneck. You know, so I think maybe you want to explore that, maybe you don't, but you definitely don't want to commit to it.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, right now it's nearly an SPI. We built it first as an in-memory one, and then extended the in-memory storage to be a etcd storage. So there's no particular reason why we used etcd except that like it's reasonably fast. The Helm chart to deploy, it's easy, and it's sort of like a known entity in the Kubernetes world. But point taken. Yeah,
so this is exciting stuff. So apart from this video I'm recording here of this meeting, I'd love to have when you're ready, and this is formally submitted as a pull request, if we get a more official video dedicated to this topic that we could promote to get more interest to the OpenWhisk community in general. I think that I've been going through a lot of articles. We're trying to get this. I'm creating a presentation where I'm trying to include the state of serverless for 2019, and people are talking about Knative and Kubernetes serverless options, and somehow we're apart from that. And I want to change that perception. So, especially showing that we could, manage some plurality of different types of container pools on different cloud Knative providers, that would be incredible to get us back into the conversation. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. One of the other things we were trying to work on for this was delegating back to an existing OpenWhisk cluster, a la what sort of Tyson shows, where you can have super fast path stuff through Knative for particular types of workloads, but maybe you want to still go run complicated black box kind of actions on an existing OpenWhisk cluster. So that'll be something else we can. I don't know. It depends on what your timelines are about if I could get that into the POC.
This is very exciting stuff. So thanks, Dan and Tyson. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks.
All right. So so in terms of the next topic I wanted to talk about before I show something is the time change. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Share other screen. So I think that people are kind of read the thread again on change the time of this meeting. Dom, did you want to, did a poll ever happen, and where are we at on that?
Okay.
So I'll stop sharing if you want to share something.
Oh, okay. So can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. This is the poll result, but actually I noticed that this is not that useful or reliable to decide the best time for our meeting. But anyway, let me share the result. So there are 5 people living in Korea, and there are 2 people in China, and 2 people in India, and 1 from Germany, 1 from London, and there are 2 people living in PST, and with 1 in US Central Time and 2 in Eastern Time. And yeah, so this is about the regular attendees. So there are 6 regular attendees, and there are 6 people who attend the meeting based on their interest. And 2 people are willing to attend but unable to attend it as of now. And yeah, one is planned to attend it. And
So it looks like so long story short is I think that you said 2 people would attend but can't attend. Would that be covered by the time? Would that be fixed if we move this meeting an hour earlier? I guess if that is my question. I know that works for you, and you're my main concern. I know that a couple of people chimed in. I think Dragos chimed in that if it was an hour earlier, it'd be earlier, but they could probably still make it. What's the net recommendation? Is it an hour earlier, or is it some other option?
based on these results?
Yeah, well, based upon, I guess, your general netting out the result of all these charts or all these pie charts.
Okay. Okay. Actually, I think there are no other people who are living in Asia other than my teammates.
Well, you're my main concern. I mean, you and your teammates are my main concern. We want to.
Yeah, but for the alternating time, there must be at least one moderator to host this meeting, right?
Yes.
But I'm not sure I and my teammates can always attend this meeting and host the meeting, moderate it. So I think I'm fine with 1 hour earlier time, but it might be burdensome for those who are living in west coast of the United States.
Well, let's do this. Can we formalize this as a voting thread? Just formalize move meeting time 1 hour earlier. Formalize this as a vote today, and 72 hours we'll take the results of the vote. And if the decision is affirmative, move it an hour earlier, then I will take the steps to change all the places where we announce the meeting. Does that sound like a good course of action?
So do you want me to make a poll out now?
I say a vote thread, please. Dave, is that the correct process?
I mean, I don't think there's not an official process where we want to do. I mean, the other thing you could do is you could also do a lazy consensus, like, you know, we're going to move the meeting. You know, you've got 72 hours to complain if you really want to complain. I mean, you're moving in an hour. I don't think it matters.
Okay.
People didn't seem too upset about that when it was discussed a few weeks ago.
All right. I mean, I'm happy to do lazy consensus. I mean, I'll make the announcement myself if you prefer. Any objectors on this call? We seem to have a good attendance today. If not, I'll just do I'll do a lazy consensus. I'll just say announce that we're moving it earlier. Please scream if this impacts you.
Yeah, I asked my team and nobody had any objection.
All right. That's the direction we're going then. Expect a post from me today after this call. Thanks, Dom, for raising this topic and hoping this accommodates your team.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I'll go back to what I was going to do. So I see Pretty was not able to join, and but I want to show a couple things. I'm trying to get things in place. Kind of screw things up a little bit. Let me get a slide up. So I guess I'll go backwards. To put this in perspective, if you recall, Pretty and I, going back to February and March, we've been playing with, trying to get our OpenWhisk runtimes so they work on Knative as well as OpenWhisk. And in addition to that, we were trying to make, at that time, we made it such that you could use Knative build to actually build the runtimes with your functions built into them for Knative and OpenWhisk for that matter. But as people who follow Knative may know, Knative build is shut down. It's going to be deprecated. I'm not sure if they figured out the complete process, but it's basically the meetings are canceled. There's no new development. I think that after 1.0, they'll just, after December, I believe, or something like that, it'll just disappear. All that work, the pipeline work, the V2 build work was moved to TechCon. And since that time, since about June-ish time, we've been playing with TechCon and trying to figure out what we can do there. So the first what Pretty's done as of yesterday is she has a pull request that basically embodies this diagram, which I'll go through in a second. Fundamentally, what we had previously with Knative build, we had basically we ran a single build task, and we did multiple things within the context of a single build step, if you will. But what TechTime does in terms of pipelines, they can actually string together a series of tasks and run them typically in a sequence to accomplish a goal. Primarily, you want to build some type of end artifact and most likely a container. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to do something more expansive. We wanted to be able to create pipelines that we saw as typical pipelines for the developer. So fundamentally, what we wanted to do, looking at the diagram from the left, we wanted to create something, a pipeline that was aware of source resources, so that the pipeline itself could take in various types of inputs. First, primarily the source function. It might live on GitHub or an S3 or just reside at some network accessible address. And we wanted to provide that as a resource into the first task of the pipeline and make that resource available to all tasks of the pipeline. So there was a lot of technical problems we had to overcome because pipelines were kind of a new concept. So Pretty, working with the community over the past few months, has gotten a couple things going. What they initially added was some conditional logic, so that as we're going through the pipeline, everything was just assumed all tasks are assumed to execute. So what we're trying to do in this pipeline is have an intelligent pipeline that basically, if you give it a source, GitHub, for example, the first task will actually be a sniffer. It will actually go out, look at the source function, for example, and say, oh, this is a Python function, or this is a Java function, or Node function, and look for associated artifacts and be able to build the function automatically for you from the repo. And we actually install the right tools for that type of language and execute those. For example, this shows Java that we'd actually build Maven, install Maven if Maven was detected, and build that. And we have an ambitious thing that I'll talk about in a second, where we want to actually create at different stages of building the final container. We want to create layers and collapse layers. We actually want to consider what I call profiles. Talking to enterprise customers, a lot of enterprise customers, they want to create and maintain easily dedicated runtimes with approved libraries and tooling that for their developers. So they've vetted the libraries. They've approved a certain set of libraries for their downstream developer staff to use for both internal and customer-facing applications. And we want to include that in this pipeline so they can actually have an optional step where they say, point to a set of libraries or set of tools, and we install it for them. We collapse that layer as well. And we can, at some point with the function, we can actually build your function and produce an intermediate or final artifact. You can produce your archive of zips. You can pop out there. Or you can go to the completion and actually create these intermediate images with these layers and with your profiles. And then actually, if you want to build a container with your function built into it, a Docker image, we can do that too and get it ready so it can be executed on Knative directly. So as of yesterday, the PR is in for the groundwork for this type of pipeline. We don't have the lettering stuff in right now. That's next. And that's kind of what I have in the dev tools, and I'll take you through that. And that's going to be built in. And our goal is by October 9th to have a demonstration of not just Node.js, but this working with Java and Python. And then we're going to create a lot of blogs and a lot of demos and stuff around that. So this is all the stuff will probably make an appearance in Tecton itself, because we've carved out an OpenWhisk space in Tecton. That's quite an accomplishment. So now I have also an additional resource helping on my team. And so you'll see a lot of OpenWhisk Tecton related activities. But the intelligent people on this call will easily see what we're doing here not only benefits OpenWhisk, but it benefits anybody building images for Tecton. This pipeline could be managed by anybody. And that's my goal. But right now it's being done under an OpenWhisk moniker, and we intend the pipeline to as a input to say my target's OpenWhisk, net run, our target Knative, just the 8080 endpoint, single route. So, but I've been especially looking at profiles and caching in particular. So I probably should have brought up the DevTools repo, but what I've been doing is trying to look at, let me go back to my slide. Actually, my slide helps better. I'm looking at JVM class pre-caching profiles. And this is where the notion of profiles immediately has an impact in DevTools, and I'll be submitting a PR for hopefully the main Java runtime. What if you've noticed and look at Java, and this is maybe missed by most people, late last summer, someone from IBM, who I met after the fact and actually has moved on from Java work, submitted a pull request to help us update to the latest .openjdk. And as part of that, they have a script file called compile class cache, which actually takes advantage of this shared class cache. And what he did was simply, during the course of the Gradle build, he basically, this script starts the proxy. It starts the Java runtime proxy, and it caches a set of classes. So I was scrutinizing that. And what I saw is that what was there today with this class cache, just loading the proxy, and it would also load the jar loader. It would load pre-cache 720 classes. So I said, but I was studying this manually, and I noticed that meat was left on the bone, meaning that if I just called a knit run in hello world, for example, additional 418 classes were cached. And that resulted in things like base64, JSON, list, collection, security, a whole slew of things that people will typically use writing any basic function, especially ones that we encourage, like JSON libraries and stuff like that. So what I saw as a net result was, if you look, this is basically with verbose mode in the JVM class. You can see the classes being cached. So this is the numbers I got were called from these logs. So what I've done, and was saying earlier, is if you look at our DevTools repo, I've created something called profiles. And I've expanded this compile class cache. What I've done is create a subdirectory saying, here's a base profile. And under that subdirectory, I can put different function directories, these like little test files, like hello world with various functionalities. And I've created scripts that automatically goes through, compiles those test folders into jar files, base64 encodes them, and then runs them against the proxy as part of the Gradle build, prepping the cache with those additional classes that are being forced in from those test cases. So now I've got automation that automatically creates the init and run payloads and automatically executes the, well, I'm using curl right now, curl commands that hits the server and creates these caches. And this is like, I want to put some text on, but I also want to add this to the main Java runtime. What I've noticed is, and I've resized my window, so I lost some of my scrolling attempts, but going to the end, so what I saw is all these classes going up, you'll see these 418 classes above here that were brought in from simply calling the init route and the run route and running the function. And that all those classes I referenced here, all the basic set collections, lists, string handling, locales, everything like that. So subsequent similar tests, so I ran hello world with parameters and hello world from environment, and a couple of similar hello world ones, and you saw no classes were loaded. So what this meant was that after the initial, if those classes are cached and primed, that typically a hello world would take about end take between, if after init was called, the run would take about 36 milliseconds to actually 36 milliseconds to run hello world. But subsequent runs, if you actually prime the cache, the actual init, I believe, takes around 16 to 18 milliseconds, and runs take 2 milliseconds. So, and these are basically, I put the most efficient type of time stamping available in Java to capture these things, and these are being written to capture these things, obviously, from standard out. But so these caches could be advantaged quite heavily to improve our Java performance. And so what I'm trying to do for the Java world, and my impetus is, I'm speaking at EclipseCon, is I want to show people can somehow create an easy way to define a set of tests that are representative of their code base, and or provide us a list of libraries, and we will actually automatically, through Tecton pipelines, build these caches for them and build their runtimes with layers that represent these caches, so the JVM, when they start in their environments, have everything they need to do their job quickly and run their functions at reduce their cold start times and their warm start times, their run times. So that's my goal. So this is in DevTools, and I'm going to start playing with adding extra profiles. Like, again, these scripts are intended to automatically detect things in the profiles in the profile directory, and automatically, based on the profile you select during the build process, go through all the subdirectories of the profile and build and run all the Java tests. So that's what that does now. So feel free to play with that, and if you have any questions, we want to do similar things for Python, and we have a Node example. We want to build this layering concept into Node as well. Anyways. Any questions?
Hey Matt, I have a question. I'm not sure I understand. I like the Java enhancements, and I understand that that seems like a huge win for Java users. For the image building, I'm not quite sure I understand all the use cases that it's aiming for, or use cases that it's specifically not aiming for. So like you mentioned, offering different runtimes to customers, and I can see, like, if you're building custom runtimes for different customers, that would be huge. Our runtime management process for our specific set of runtimes is very clunky. So I like the idea of enhancing that, but we don't use it that often. We don't change our runtimes that often. Is this meant so that you can change your runtimes much more frequently, or make runtimes one-to-one with your actions, or
well, I think it covers that entire spectrum. Primarily, the use cases are first and foremost. I started with the end user developer. So the end user developer, especially in Java, it's hard for them in general to build simply. My goal is to have a single Tecton build command with minimizing the set of inputs to it that's able to point to a GitHub repo, point to a source, runtime image, OpenWhisk image in Java or whatever, and point it to a set of profiles if you're a corporate user, saying, here's my known corporate libraries, and it'll automatically pop out your fat jar for you, or pop out an image that has your function built into it. So the end user was principally and foremost in my mind, but over time I saw that people like corporations might want to dictate and fix known sets of approved libraries and tools they want to include in this. So this would facilitate the individual user who doesn't have profiles to help them just build fat jars or create container images, on an individual basis. Or if they're a corporate developer, corporations like customers that I'm starting to work with now, could actually define a set of build their own runtimes and use that as a starting image, and use Tecton to build that intermediate image for developers to derive from. Or if they want to make it more dynamic, they could actually start from our base image, always pick up our most current base, and dynamically build in their set of libraries, or maybe experimental ones. So maybe they'd have a set of golden blessed libraries, and they're moving to a new one. It goes back to the idea of revisions. Maybe they want to move to the next revision, and they can temporarily point to a new profile with a new set of libraries, new versions. This facilitates all those use cases. Does that make more sense, Tyson?
Yeah, thank you.
So again, Tecton is where you see most of this pipeline work being done. We've had to do a lot of ground. So again, the holdup the last few weeks has been the fact of state management. So we have a lot of state that we had from the very first task, from where we try to marshal a lot of the code, and so that resource information was not being propagated through the pipeline. So Pretty has learned Tecton quite well, and she's added code to take all the initial task resource information, the magic cookie, and make sure it was propagated to all the tasks downstream. She worked with another developer to make conditional logic. So what we can do is we can actually do a test on the first task and say, hey, we sniffed this. This is Python. And then what they can do is we can selectively have a choice. What tasks do we run next? What tools do we run? Tools do we install? What things do we do? Because it's Python. So we can actually have conditional logic in the pipeline, which was not available prior to this work and her work with another individual there. So we're driving a lot of core functionality in Tecton as part of doing this work as well. So if there's no more questions, I'll stop there. Again, this is in dev tools right now. I'll probably submit PR for the main Java stuff just to improve our cache creation or cache priming. I plan to meet with our Java JVM guru with an IBM to see what the state of the art is and see what things we can do to improve our performance going forward. And I also want to start updating us before the end of October to get Java 11 supported at the very least, and have a better way of supporting new adopt releases more sensitive to their release schedule to the downstream developers as well. All right. Next on the agenda was I was inviting Pretty to demo. She wasn't ready this week, so maybe she'll be ready by the next meeting. So I guess we're at the top of the hour. No other topics. Any other topics? Ad hoc topics? Anything anybody wants to discuss? If not, we just need to pick a volunteer for the next meeting. which will be an hour earlier. So it'll be 1 hour earlier than every meeting we've had. 11 a.m. Eastern will become 10 a.m., etc. Any volunteers to host the next meeting? Dom? Sven? Anybody? Somebody hasn't?
Okay, I will host the meeting.
All right, that will be, I believe, look at my calendar, October 2nd. All right, so October 2nd will be 1 hour earlier. I'll make the announcement on the dev list and see who screens.
Okay, perfect.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day,
you.
afternoon, evening. Bye.
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 Bye.